The Blue Ember Lounge was the kind of place where rich men came to forget how rich they were. Dim lights, expensive liquor, soft jazz, hiding whispered deals. Grace Nolan balanced a tray of cocktails, her mind far away on her sick son, on overdue rent, on the speech therapist who'd stopped calling when the payments stopped. The smell of whiskey clung to her hair. The ache in her feet was her only constant companion. It was close to 2:00 a.m. when she noticed him, a man at the balcony, swaying over the glass railing, the city lights trembling beneath him. His suit was tailored, his watch gleamed under the bar's blue glow, but his eyes were empty. He tilted forward, his drink slipping from his hand. Instinct took over. Grace dropped her tray, sprinted, and grabbed the back of his jacket just as his balance gave out. Her knees scraped the floor as she hauled him backward with everything she had. He collapsed against her, heavy and motionless. The crowd gasped, then pretended to go back to their drinks. That's how it worked here. Drama was entertainment until it wasn't. Grace shook the man's shoulder. "Sir, can you hear me?" He turned his head, his voice slurred and broken. "You should have let me fall." He reeked of whiskey and regret. Security rushed over, dragging him away before she could ask anything else. Her manager, a woman with cold eyes and a tighter bun than her morals, stormed in. "Grace, you made a scene. We don't save drunks here, we serve them." Grace tried to explain, but the woman's hand shot up. "You're done. Clean out your locker." By dawn, she was standing in the alley behind the lounge, her uniform stained, her paycheck withheld for damages. She had $27 left, and no idea how to tell her son he'd miss another week of therapy. The sun rose pale and cruel, bouncing off the glass towers that belonged to people like the man she'd saved. At home, her landlord was waiting. Rent was due yesterday. He smiled without warmth. Grace promised, lied, begged. He left her with an ultimatum and a smirk. She looked at her sleeping boy, his small hand clutching a toy airplane, the only gift she could afford that Christmas. The television flickered to life with a breaking headline. Tech billionaire Cole Mercer found unconscious in Chicago nightclub alive, thanks to an unnamed waitress. Grace froze. The screen showed his face, the man she'd pulled from death. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A male voice spoke softly, too calm to be normal. "Miss Nolan, Mr. Mercer would like to speak with you. His jet leaves in 1 hour." Grace stared at the cracked window, the city waking outside. The man who'd nearly fallen into oblivion wanted to see her again, and she had no idea that saving his life had just destroyed hers. Grace stood in front of the cracked mirror, brushing her tangled hair with shaking hands. Her reflection looked older than 27 sleepless eyes, hollow cheeks, skin pale from too many skipped meals. On the table lay a shut-off notice from the electric company, and an eviction warning folded neatly beside her son's toy airplane. The morning sun didn't bring warmth, only the reminder that she was out of time. A knock rattled the door. Grace froze. Through the peephole, she saw a man in a black suit, clean-cut, calm. The kind of calm that came with money and control. "Miss Nolan," his voice was polite but firm. "Mr. Mercer sent me. We need to leave. The jet departs in 40 minutes. "The jet?" Grace laughed bitterly. "You've got the wrong girl." He handed her a folder. Inside was her name, address, and a check blank except for the amount line, which read to be determined by the recipient. She looked up, confused. "Mr. Mercer believes he owes you a debt," the man said. "He insists you come with us. Refusal would make things complicated." The word complicated hung in the air like a warning. Grace's stomach twisted. She thought about her landlord's smirk, her son's medical bills, and the zero in her bank account. Maybe it was just a meeting, a thank you, a weird rich person gesture. Or maybe, like everything else in her life, it was a trap she didn't see coming. She packed one small duffel bag, 2 shirts, her son's photo, and his toy airplane. She kissed his forehead at Mrs. Lang's daycare, whispering, "Mummy's getting us help, okay?" He didn't answer, his voice still locked somewhere behind silence. A black SUV waited at the curb, tinted windows gleaming like mirrors. Inside, silence pressed against her ears. The driver said nothing. The assistant typed constantly on his phone. Chicago's grey skyline faded behind them, replaced by the endless flat stretch of highway leading to the private airfield. When the jet came into view, Grace's breath caught. Sleek, white, and absurdly large, it shimmered under the cold morning light. The stairs lowered automatically, as if greeting royalty. The assistant motioned for her to board. She hesitated at the foot of the steps. "Why me?" she asked. "Why is he doing this?" "Because you pulled him back when no one else did," the man replied simply. Most people would have watched him fall. Inside, the jet smelled of leather and money. A flight attendant smiled too brightly, offering champagne. Grace shook her head, clutching her duffel like a lifeline. The engines roared, and her stomach rolled as they lifted off. Below, Chicago shrank into a patchwork of glass and smoke. She stared out the window, wondering if she'd just sold her soul for a free flight. 2 hours later, the jet descended toward a strip of land surrounded by turquoise water, a private island. Grace's hands trembled as she stepped onto the runway. A convoy of golf carts waited. At the front stood Cole Mercer. He wasn't the broken drunk Shed saved. His dark hair was neatly combed, his posture straight, his grey eyes sharp and unreadable. The man looked alive, painfully alive. "You came," he said softly, almost surprised. "I didn't think I had a choice." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Neither did I, once." He nodded toward the mansion rising beyond the palms. "Let's talk." Grace followed, sand crunching under her cheap shoes. The air smelled like salt and secrets. Whatever this man wanted, it wasn't gratitude. And deep down, Grace knew this jet wasn't taking her toward freedom. It was taking her into a pit lined with gold. The car curved along a stone driveway that looked like it had never known a speck of dirt. Grace's heart pounded as the mansion came into view. White columns, glass walls, and a view of the ocean that could make God jealous. She had never been anywhere this beautiful or this quiet. The silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt staged, like a photo too perfectly framed. 2 maids opened the massive doors without a word. Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors, abstract paintings, chandeliers shaped like dripping glass teardrops. Grace's shoes squeaked, loud enough to echo. Cole Mercer walked ahead without looking back. He moved with that detached confidence rich people wore like armor. He stopped at a long hallway lined with portraits, men and women, in black and white, all carrying the same cold eyes. "My family," he said. "We build, we buy, and we bury our mistakes." His voice sounded almost proud, almost haunted. Grace didn't reply. She didn't know what to say to a man who had everything and nothing at once. They entered a sunroom where waves shimmered through the glass. A maid placed a tray of coffee between them. Cole gestured for her to sit. "You saved my life," he said. "That isn't something I take lightly." Grace gave a nervous smile. "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Mercer." Anyone would have done the same. He tilted his head, studying her. "No. They wouldn't have. People like you still believe in pulling others back from the edge. People like me, we usually push." The words made her skin prickle. She wanted to leave, but curiosity kept her rooted. Cole slid a folder across the table. Inside lay a contract. Employment agreement, personal assistant to Mr. Cole Mercer. The salary figure at the bottom made her eyes blur. "500,000? She whispered. "I want you here for 1 week, he said. "Help me organize some personal affairs. Keep me grounded. After that, you'll leave with this money and no further contact." It sounded absurd, yet her mind flashed to hospital bills, eviction threats, her son's quiet eyes. "Why me?" she asked. He leaned back. "Because you're not afraid of me," Grace signed, her hand trembling. She told herself it was just a job, but when she looked up, his gaze was somewhere far away, on ghosts she couldn't see. Later, a housekeeper named Marla led Grace to her room, a guest suite overlooking the ocean. Too perfect, too quiet. On the bedside table sat a silver bracelet, delicate and unfamiliar. A small note read, "Wear this at all times, for your safety." Grace frowned, slipping it on. The metal hummed faintly, almost vibrating against her pulse. She caught her reflection in the mirror, an ordinary woman trapped inside a frame of luxury. That night, she couldn't sleep. The mansion creaked with the wind, but beneath it she heard something else. Faint piano music, slow and sorrowful, coming from somewhere downstairs. She followed the sound barefoot through the dark hall. The melody led her to a locked door. Through the crack of light, she saw movement Cole, sitting at a grand piano, playing alone in the dark. The song stopped suddenly. His head turned toward the door, eyes glinting like steel. "You shouldn't wander at night," he said quietly. Grace froze. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He smiled without warmth. "This house remembers everything." That night, Grace realized she hadn't been invited to paradise. She had been recruited into someone else's haunting. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains like liquid gold, but it brought no warmth. Grace sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the silver bracelet she'd been told to wear. Its smooth surface caught the light in strange pulses, almost alive. She wanted to take it off, but something told her it wasn't just jewelry. A knock came. Marla, the housekeeper, appeared with breakfast so elaborate it looked painted rather than cooked. "Mr. Mercer will see you in the study," she said, her voice careful, neutral, rehearsed. Grace noticed the woman's hands trembling as she set down the tray. The study was enormous floor-to-ceiling windows, books arranged with surgical precision, and a scent of cedar and salt. Cole Mercer sat behind a mahogany desk, scrolling through digital files on a glass tablet. When he looked up, there was something measured in his eyes, something that made Grace's stomach tighten. "You slept well?" he asked, though it sounded like an order, not a question. "I suppose," she replied, trying not to sound nervous. He slid another folder toward her. "Your duties. I need someone trustworthy to catalog personal archives and handle confidential correspondence. You'll find the access codes inside." Grace flipped through the pages. It wasn't paperwork, it was a labyrinth. Hidden accounts, handwritten notes, photographs of people she didn't know. "Why me?" she asked again. Cole leaned back, folding his hands. "Because the people who used to work for me stole from me. You don't even have the means to try." His words hit like a slap. She wanted to walk out, but the memory of her son's face held her in place. "You said a week," she whispered. He nodded. 1 week. No questions, no secrets beyond these walls. In return, your debt is gone, and so is your past. "Debt?" The word chilled her. "What debt?" Cole smiled faintly, as if she'd said something naive. "You saved my life. That kind of act creates a bond. Some people call it gratitude. I call it leverage." Grace's throat went dry. She realized the bracelet on her wrist had a tiny, blinking light. A tracker. She looked up sharply, but Cole was already standing, walking to the window. "This isn't a cage," he said without turning around. "It's protection. There are people who would pay to know where you are, or to make sure you never leave." "Why?" He didn't answer, only said, "Lunch at 2. Don't be late." As he left, Grace's hands shook so badly, she nearly dropped the folder. Inside, she found a photograph of a young woman with sea-green eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. Written on the back, Eleanor, forever mine. The date was 3 years earlier. That night, while organizing digital files, Grace stumbled on a hidden folder labeled EL. Inside were love letters and death certificates. Eleanor Mercer. Wife. Drowned. Case closed. Grace's chest tightened as she stared at the last line of the report. No foul play suspected. Outside, thunder rolled. Somewhere in the house, that same piano song began again, low, haunting, unfinished. She followed the sound down the hallway, stopping by the locked room. The light flickered beneath the door as if someone were moving inside. Her reflection in the glass showed her own terrified face, and behind it, a shadow that wasn't hers. In that moment, Grace understood. She hadn't entered a billionaire's mansion. She'd stepped into a mausoleum built from guilt, secrets, and lies that refused to stay buried. Rain swept over the island like a grey curtain that morning. Grace stood on the balcony outside her room, watching the waves slam against the cliffs. The mansion behind her hummed faintly with generators. She'd been there 3 days, and every hour stretched longer than the one before. The staff spoke in whispers, their eyes hollow, their smiles forced. It wasn't just fear of Cole Mercer. It was devotion mixed with dread. She'd spent the night reading more of the letters she found in the archives. They were written in Cole's handwriting, addressed to Eleanor, his wife, the one who had drowned. "If I close my eyes, I can still hear you breathing under the water," one line said. "I built this island to keep you close, but all I've built is a prison." Grace couldn't shake the chill the words left behind. At breakfast, she found Cole in the dining hall, a newspaper folded neatly beside a cup of untouched coffee. He was staring out the window as lightning flashed over the sea. "Do you ever sleep?" she asked, sitting opposite him. "Sleep is a waste of time," he said. "You can't outdream what already haunts you." She hesitated. "Is it Eleanor?" His jaw tightened. "It was my fault," he said after a long pause. "The storm hit faster than expected. I told her to wait, but she took the boat anyway. She said she couldn't breathe on this island anymore." Grace swallowed hard. "You loved her. I built empires for her," he said softly. "And when she died, I tried to follow. You stopped me." The memory of that night flashed through her, his weight collapsing in her arms, the smell of whiskey, the hopelessness in his eyes. "You wanted to die?" she whispered. He looked at her then, really looked, as though seeing her for the first time. "It wasn't courage that made you grab me," he said. "It was mercy. And mercy can be cruel when it drags someone back into hell." Grace felt her throat tighten. "Maybe you're not supposed to live for yourself," she said quietly. "Maybe you live to fix what's broken." He gave a small, bitter laugh. "You think there's anything left to fix?" Before she could answer, his phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen, visible for just a second. "Board meeting confirmed. Reports sealed. Project Echo under review." Cole's expression hardened. He grabbed the phone, stood, and left the room without another word. Grace looked around. The butler, Thomas, was watching her from the corner, expression unreadable. "He doesn't like being questioned," he murmured. "I wasn't questioning," Grace said. "I was listening." Thomas gave a faint, humorless smile. "Listening can be dangerous here, Miss Nolan." That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She wandered down to the study, drawn by a faint light under the door. Cole sat at his desk, a half-empty glass beside him, staring at a computer screen. The document title read, Project Echo. Phase 4, Human Data Trials. The spreadsheet was full of numbers, names, and medical signatures. "What is this?" she asked. He didn't flinch. "Nothing you should see. Those names, they're people." He shut the laptop sharply. "Go to bed, Grace." "No," she said, voice trembling. What are you doing?" He stood slowly, the storm's reflection flickering in his eyes. "I'm trying to make up for what I destroyed. But redemption has a cost, and not everyone can afford it." The thunder outside cracked like a warning. Grace suddenly understood that the man she'd saved wasn't just broken, he was dangerous, and she might be the next person he dragged down with him. The storm hadn't stopped. It was as if the island itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Grace sat at her desk, cataloguing files just as Cole had ordered, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the document she'd seen, Project Echo. The title clung to her mind like a splinter. Why had her name felt familiar inside that chaos of numbers? Hours passed. The house was quiet except for the wind scraping against the windows. Curiosity won over fear. She slipped into the study after midnight, barefoot, heart hammering. Cole's laptop sat on the desk, dark and still. She hesitated, then typed the password she'd seen him use once when he thought she wasn't looking, Eleanor 89. The screen came to life. The folder titled EL was still there, but deeper inside the drive she found another. Project Echo, Personal Files. Her fingers shook as she clicked. Rows of classified documents opened, medical trials, biometric records, signed consent forms. But one line stopped her cold. Subject 47. Thomas Nolan. Her breath caught. That was her father's name. Scrolling further, she saw notes in Cole's handwriting. Test subject suffered cardiac arrest during Phase 2. Data integrity maintained. Family notified. Deceased, natural causes. Grace covered her mouth, fighting back a scream. Her father hadn't died of a heart attack at the construction site, like everyone said. Head died because of this. Because of Cole Mercer. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. She snapped the laptop shut and backed away. Cole appeared at the door, hair damp from the rain, shirt unbuttoned at the collar. "Can't sleep?" he asked. Grace forced a smile. "The storm's too loud." He studied her face. "You were in here." She shook her head quickly. "No, I don't lie," he interrupted. "This house tells me everything." Her heart thudded. "You spied on me." He sighed, walking toward the desk. "Every room has motion sensors. It's for security." He paused, noticing the faint heat still radiating from the laptop. His eyes darkened. "What did you see?" Grace said nothing. Her silence was answer enough. "Thomas Nolan," he murmured. His tone softened for the first time. "He was a good man." Her voice cracked. "You killed him." Cole froze. "You think I wanted that?" He slammed his fist against the desk. He volunteered. He believed in what we were building. Project Echo was meant to save people, to store human consciousness before death. But the first tests failed. Her hair wasn't supposed to die. Grace stepped back, tears burning her eyes. "You used my father like an experiment." "He was your father?" Cole's voice broke, genuine shock flickering across his face. "Yes," she spat, "and you covered it up." Cole's jaw tightened, guilt flickering through the anger. "If I could trade my life for his, I would." "Then why didn't you?" For a long moment, neither spoke. The storm roared outside, lightning flashing against his pale face. Finally, Cole said quietly, "Now you know why I drink. Why I wanted to fall that night. You saved me from the only punishment I deserved." Grace turned away, voice trembling. "Maybe I made a mistake." He didn't stop her as she left, only whispered into the darkness, "So did I." When she returned to her room, the bracelet on her wrist blinked red. A soft electronic voice whispered from it, "Unauthorized access detected." That night, Grace realized something terrifying. She hadn't just uncovered Cole's secret. She had triggered a system built to erase anyone who did. The morning after she discovered her father's name, Grace woke to the sharp buzz of the intercom. "Mr. Mercer requests your presence in the grand dining hall." "Formal attire," Marla's voice said, low and tense. Grace stared at the wall for a long time before answering. Her bracelet still blinked faintly red, as if reminding her that every breath on this island was being watched. In the closet, someone had hung a black gown that shimmered like oil under light. A card pinned to the hanger read, "Wear this tonight. It's a celebration." The words felt like a threat. By 7, the mansion transformed. Dozens of guests filled the marble hall, men in tailored suits, women wrapped in diamonds. The air smelled of wine, salt, and wealth. Grace stood near the edge, invisible in a room that valued appearance over humanity. She caught a glimpse of Cole across the room, perfectly composed, shaking hands and smiling like a man who didn't have ghosts screaming behind his eyes. A woman approached her, tall and graceful, voice dripping with sugar and venom. "You must be the miracle waitress," she said, "the one who saved our dear Cole." Her eyes glimmered with cruel amusement. "Tell me, how much do heroes earn these days?" Grace stiffened. "I'm just an employee." "Of course you are, darling," the woman replied, glancing toward Cole. "That's how it always starts." Before Grace could respond, Cole appeared beside her. "Victoria," he said coolly, "I see you've found my assistant." His tone made it clear the conversation was over. He turned to Grace. "You look unexpected. Is that a compliment?" "Maybe," he said, a ghost of a smile flickering before he gestured towards the long table. "Come. Dinner's about to begin." Grace sat beside him, trying to ignore the dozen curious eyes watching her. Conversation hummed around the table talk of markets, mergers, and scandals disguised as jokes. Cole barely touched his food. When a guest mentioned Project Echo, his knife froze mid-air. Victoria leaned forward, voice sly. "You should tell your lovely assistant about it. She seems curious about your secrets." Grace's blood ran cold. She forced herself to meet Cole's gaze, daring him to lie. His face remained unreadable. "Project Echo is over," he said evenly. "Some things are better buried." The table went silent for a beat. Then laughter erupted, forced and brittle. Grace pushed her plate away, nausea rising. Halfway through dessert, a man in a grey suit turned toward her. "Forgive me," he said, squinting, "but aren't you Thomas Nolan's daughter?" The sound of her father's name sliced through the air like a blade. Grace froze. Cole's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the marble floor. The entire room went silent. Cole recovered first, his voice calm but cold. "Miss Dawson is mistaken. Miss Nolan is part of my internal review team." Lies. Polished, effortless lies. The guests accepted them with fake smiles, but Grace could feel the shift whispers forming like cracks in glass. After dinner, she escaped to the terrace, the ocean black beneath her. Her hands trembled against the railing. The stars looked close enough to touch, but felt impossibly far. Behind her, Cole's voice came quietly. "You weren't supposed to hear that." "You knew who I was all along," she said. "Yes." "Then why bring me here?" He didn't answer. He only handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a gold locket, her father's initials carved on the back. "I found it when he died," Cole said softly. "I couldn't face you, not then." Grace's eyes filled with tears, fury and grief colliding in her chest. "You should have left me alone." He looked past her toward the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "You don't understand. The past isn't done with either of us." And when thunder rolled across the island again, Grace knew this dinner wasn't a celebration. It was the beginning of a war she never agreed to fight. The storm that had threatened the island finally arrived. By morning, palm trees bent like fragile stems, and the sky churned an angry grey. Grace hadn't slept. The dinner still burned in her memory, her father's name, the whispers, the humiliation that sat like lead in her chest. She wanted to confront Cole again, to demand answers, but when she reached his office, the door was locked. Marla was waiting in the hallway, wringing her hands. "You should stay in your room today, Miss Nolan," she whispered. "There's company arriving." "Who?" Before Marla could reply, the sound of helicopter blades thundered overhead. Grace moved to the balcony just in time to see a sleek black chopper landing on the private helipad. When the door opened, a woman stepped out impeccably dressed, tall, her dark hair caught by the wind. Her heels clicked with authority. Even from a distance, Grace felt the chill of recognition. The woman's name echoed in gossip magazines and boardrooms alike. Evelyn Blake. She was Cole's late wife's sister and the acting CEO of Mercer Technologies. The one person powerful enough to destroy him. Within the hour, the mansion buzzed like a disturbed hive. Staff hurried, voices hushed. Grace lingered near the grand staircase as Evelyn entered, flanked by 2 lawyers. She radiated command, beauty sharpened by ambition. Cole waited at the base of the stairs, jaw set. "Evelyn," he said, "you could have called." "I did," she replied, kissing his cheek lightly, like a snake tasting the air. "You didn't answer." "So I came." Her gaze slid to Grace. "And you must be the waitress." The word sliced cleanly, deliberate. Grace straightened her shoulders. "Grace Nolan." Evelyn's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. The girl who pulled my brother-in-law from a balcony and right into a scandal." "The media loves you." Cole's voice hardened. "That's enough." "Oh, I'm not judging," Evelyn said sweetly. "I just think you should be careful, Cole. People like her tend to want something." Grace felt her face flush, but before she could speak, Cole said quietly, "She wants nothing from me, which is more than I can say for most." That silenced the room for a moment. Evelyn's eyes glinted with interest. How noble. After lunch, the mansion's atmosphere turned suffocating. Grace wandered outside to the garden, needing air. The rain had stopped, but the wind carried whispers of something darker. From the open veranda, she could hear raised voices Evelyn and Cole arguing inside the study. "You're losing control," Evelyn snapped. "The board's ready to vote you out. This woman, this waitress, is a liability." "I don't care what the board thinks," Cole shot back. "And you don't get to decide who I trust." "Oh, I don't?" Evelyn's tone dropped, cold as glass. "Then maybe you'll care when they see the photos." Grace's stomach turned. She pressed closer to the wall, peering through the window. Evelyn slid a folder across the desk. Inside were glossy photos Sher and Cole on the balcony, standing too close, faces inches apart. They looked intimate. Manipulated or not, they were damning. Cole's expression darkened. "Where did you get these?" "Where do you think?" Evelyn said softly. "The press already has them. When this story breaks, your stock collapses, and you'll be finished." Grace stepped back, heart pounding. The truth twisted like a knife. Someone had followed her. Someone wanted her gone. That night, Cole didn't appear for dinner. The staff avoided her eyes. In her room, Grace turned on the television. The headline was already running. Billionaire's affair with working-class heroine exposed. Her photo filled the screen. The bracelet on her wrist buzzed, vibrating with a new alert. The screen blinked. Restriction mode activated. She yanked it, but the metal burned her skin. Panic clawed her throat. She was no longer a guest. She was a liability under surveillance. And as thunder cracked over the island once more, Grace realized Evelyn hadn't just arrived to warn Cole she'd come to destroy him, and Grace was the perfect weapon to pull the trigger. By dawn, the island was no longer peaceful. Helicopters circled like vultures, their cameras flashing from the sky. News anchors repeated her name again and again. Grace Nolan, the waitress who seduced billionaire Cole Mercer. Every word felt like a wound she couldn't stop reopening. Grace stood at the window of her room, the bracelet on her wrist still pulsing faintly red. Her reflection stared back pale, frightened, and cornered. Down below, she saw staff loading luggage into black SUVs. Someone was leaving. Maybe everyone. A soft knock came. Cole entered, wearing the same suit from the night before, but the calm in his eyes was gone. He looked exhausted, hunted. "They've taken the story public," he said. "My lawyers are trying to contain it." Grace crossed her arms. "Contain what? The lie you let them believe?" His gaze hardened. "You think I leaked this?" "I don't know what to think anymore," she said bitterly. "But someone's making sure the world thinks I'm your mistress." Cole stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Evelyn did this. She's been planning it since the day you saved me. She needed leverage, and you gave her the perfect one." Grace wanted to believe him, but doubt was poison. "And you never thought to warn me? Never thought I'd be destroyed right alongside you?" He flinched, then said quietly, "You were never supposed to be part of this." Her voice cracked. "But I am." Outside, thunder rolled over the ocean. The first drops of rain began to fall again, as if the island itself mourned the lies, spilling through its halls. By noon, reporters were camped outside the property gates. Grace tried to call her son's caretaker, but every call went to voicemail. Her stomach twisted. She needed to leave. She packed her few things, the duffel bag she'd brought, her father's locket, and the small airplane toy. When she stepped into the hall, 2 of Cole's security guards were waiting. "Mr. Mercer's orders," one said. "You're not to leave the premises." Grace's breath caught. "You're keeping me here. For your protection." The words tasted like a lie. She turned and ran, her bare feet tapping against the marble. Through the glass corridor, she saw Cole arguing with Evelyn near the garden. Grace hid behind a column, heart pounding. Evelyn's voice was sharp. "You're finished, Cole. The board is voting you out tonight. You've embarrassed this company, this family. And for what? A charity case?" Cole snapped. "Say her name again." Evelyn smirked. "Grace Nolan, the woman who's about to ruin you." Grace's blood froze. Evelyn handed him a tablet. On the screen was a video, grainy, time-stamped, showing Grace entering his office late at night, opening his laptop, scrolling through confidential files, her face clear, her hands moving with purpose. It was the night she'd discovered her father's name. Someone had filmed it. "You planted this," Cole said, voice trembling with rage. Evelyn shrugged. "All I did was let the truth tell itself. You can't hide what she's done." Grace stumbled backward, her breath shallow. The video wasn't doctored, it was real. She had been there. But Evelyn had twisted it into betrayal. That evening, Cole's guards found her near the docks, trying to reach the radio tower. He confronted her under the pouring rain, his face pale with anger and heartbreak. "You broke into my files," he said. "You used me. I was trying to find the truth," she cried. "You killed my father." His eyes flared. "You think I don't live with that? Every day?" For a moment, neither moved. Rain soaked through their clothes, thunder shaking the ground. Finally, he said, "You're leaving. Tonight. Before I change my mind." Grace wanted to scream, to beg him to see the manipulation for what it was, but his expression was made of stone. By midnight, she was forced onto a boat bound for the mainland, the island fading behind her like a nightmare. As lightning split the sky, Grace realized she hadn't escaped a scandal. She had walked straight into a trap built to erase her completely. The boat sliced through black water under a bruised sky. Grace sat near the bow, her arms wrapped around her duffel bag, salt spray stinging her face. Every mile that separated her from the island should have felt like freedom, yet all she felt was grief, sharp and suffocating. She replayed Cole's final words in her mind, each one striking harder than the storm around her. "You used me." By the time the boat reached the mainland, dawn had bled into grey. Reporters already waited at the pier, cameras flashing like gunfire. "Grace Nolan, did you have an affair with Cole Mercer? Are you pregnant with his child? Did you blackmail him for money?" Their voices cut through the air like knives. Grace pushed past them, clutching her bag tighter, her heart pounding. She didn't answer. Every word would only feed the fire. At the dockside gate, 2 police officers stood waiting. "Grace Nolan?" one asked. "Yes," she said, voice trembling. "You're under investigation for corporate theft and data breach. You'll need to come with us." Her knees nearly buckled. "What?" The officer showed her a printed warrant. Unauthorized access to Mercer Technologies servers. Evelyn's video. The perfect evidence. Grace's world spun as they led her toward the car. The reporters swarmed closer, shouting, snapping photos of her handcuffs glinting in the early light. At the station, she sat in a cold interrogation room that smelled of stale coffee and fear. A detective with tired eyes slid a folder across the table. Inside were stills from the video, her face illuminated by the laptop screen. "That's not what it looks like," she whispered. He sighed. "It never is." Grace clenched her fists. "Evelyn Blake set me up. She's trying to destroy Cole Mercer, and I was caught in the middle." The detective leaned back. "Miss Nolan, Evelyn Blake's team has already submitted proof that you sold private information from Project Echo to competitors. Do you know how many zeros are on that lawsuit?" "I didn't sell anything," she cried. "I didn't even know what I was looking at." He studied her for a long moment, then closed the file. "You're free to go for now. But if you leave the city, we'll find you." Outside, the world felt bigger and crueler than ever. Her phone had dozens of missed calls from unknown numbers, journalists, debt collectors. But one message made her freeze. It was from the hospital. "Your father's emergency contact remains listed as active. Please confirm patient status." Her breath caught. Her father was dead. Had been for years. Unless she ran to the nearest payphone, dialing the number. A nurse answered, confused. "I'm sorry, Mom. There's no patient by that name." That message was an automatic reminder. Old system glitch. Grace sank against the wall, shaking. The hope had lasted only seconds, but it shattered her all the same. That night, she took a train back to her small apartment. The building manager was waiting outside her door with a clipboard. "You're 3 weeks behind," he said. "You've got 24 hours to clear out." She nodded numbly. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and defeat. Her son's toys were still scattered across the couch from before she left. On the table, the toy airplane waited, the one that had always given him comfort. She picked it up, holding it against her chest. A thunderclap rattled the windows. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. She almost ignored it, then answered. A voice she hadn't expected, hoarse, strained, whispered, "Grace, it's Cole." Her heart stopped. "Cole? Don't call me. You made me a criminal." "No," he rasped. "They made us both criminals. You have to get out. Evelyn isn't done." The line went dead. Outside, sirens wailed closer. Blue lights flashed against her walls, and as police cars screeched to a stop outside her window, Grace realized she wasn't being rescued, she was being erased. The pounding on the door came just after midnight. "Chicago police, open up!" Grace froze, her son's toy airplane still clutched in her shaking hands. She backed toward the kitchen, searching for any escape, but the only light came from the flashing blue sirens outside. "Please," she whispered to no one. "Please, not like this." The door burst open. Officers flooded in, guns drawn. "Grace Nolan," one barked. "You're wanted for questioning in connection to the Mercer data breach." "I didn't do anything," she cried, her voice breaking. "I'm innocent." They weren't listening. They grabbed her arms, pulling her out into the rain. Neighbors peeked through cracked doors, phones raised, capturing every humiliating second. Grace kept her eyes down. The city that had never noticed her before now watched like she was a monster. At the station, the chaos was different this time. No interrogation, just silence. A lawyer she didn't know handed her a statement. "Sign this," he said. "You'll be out within the hour." "What is it?" "An admission of unauthorized access to confidential property. You'll avoid prison." Grace stared at him. "You work for Evelyn, don't you?" He didn't answer. The look in his eyes was confirmation enough. She tore the paper in half. "Tell her I'm not her scapegoat." 2 hours later, she was released on temporary bail. The city was asleep, but Grace wasn't alone. As she stepped out into the rain, a dark car pulled up. The window rolled down just enough for her to see the drivers face the security guard from Coles Island. "Get in," he said. "You're not safe here." Her instincts screamed to run, but exhaustion won. She climbed in. The car sped through the empty streets. "Where are you taking me?" "Someplace quiet," he replied. "Mr. Mercer wants to fix this." She turned to him sharply. "Cole, he sent you?" The guard didn't answer. Instead, he handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a single photo, a hospital room, white and sterile, a patient lying unconscious. The caption written beneath, "Mercer critical condition." Grace's throat tightened. "What happened to him?" "Car accident," the guard said. "Happened hours after he called you. They said he was driving fast, like he wanted to die." Her chest ached. She remembered the way he had sounded on the phone, desperate, fractured. "Take me there," she whispered. The guard hesitated. "You sure? It's under federal watch. Please." He sighed and turned the wheel. They drove for hours, crossing into the outskirts of the city. Dawn was breaking when the car stopped outside St. Jude's Medical Center. Grace stepped out, rain dripping from her coat, heart hammering against her ribs. Inside, the nurse looked at her name and frowned. "No visitors allowed," she said. Grace leaned closer, her voice trembling. "He called me before the crash. Please, I just need to see him." The nurse hesitated, then nodded slightly toward the elevator. "Room 514. 5 minutes." Grace slipped inside quietly. The steady beep of a heart monitor filled the room. Cole lay motionless, bandaged, his face pale against the pillow. Machines breathed for him. She sank into the chair beside him, her tears falling freely. "You idiot," she whispered. "You said you'd fix it, not end it." A faint flicker crossed his face, like the twitch of a dream. The monitor's rhythm steadied. Grace reached for his hand and froze. His wrist was bare. The tracking bracelet was gone. Before she could process it, the door burst open. The guard from the car stood there, holding a gun. "I'm sorry, Miss Nolan," he said, eyes cold now. "Orders changed. You weren't supposed to get this far." Her mind went blank. "Where's Cole's bracelet?" "Gone," he said, "and soon you'll be too." As the sound of the safety click filled the sterile room, Grace finally understood Cole hadn't been the target all along. She was. The gun's click echoed louder than the storm outside. Grace froze, the sterile air thick with terror. The guard's hand didn't shake. His eyes empty, practice told her this wasn't his first time doing something like this. "Why?" she whispered, voice raw. "Why me?" He didn't answer. "Orders," he said flatly, stepping closer. Grace's mind raced. The only sound was the rhythmic beeping of Cole's heart monitor. She glanced at the IV pole beside his bed-thin, metallic, standing between her and death. When he took his next step, she grabbed it and swung. The pole connected with his wrist, the gun clattering to the floor. "Get down!" she screamed to no one. The guard cursed, lunging forward. Grace scrambled across the floor, grabbing the gun, her fingers slick with sweat. Her heart pounded so violently she thought it might shatter her ribs. She aimed with trembling hands. "Don't move!" For the first time, he hesitated. "You won't shoot me?" "Try me," she said, voice trembling but steady enough to make him pause. Suddenly, the door burst open. 2 hospital security officers stormed in, shouting orders. The guard turned, too slow. One officer tackled him to the ground. The weapon flew from Grace's grasp as the man was cuffed and dragged out, yelling something about unfinished work. Grace collapsed beside the bed, shaking. The nurses rushed in moments later, alarmed by the commotion. One of them checked Cole's monitors, frowning. Heart rate spiking. "We need to stabilize him." Grace backed away, her breath ragged. A doctor entered, a woman in her 50s, with silver hair and tired eyes. "Miss Nolan, you need to leave." But Grace couldn't move. Her gaze was locked on Cole. His chest rose and fell weakly, and then his eyelids fluttered. "Just once." The doctor froze. "Cole, can you hear me?" The faintest whisper slipped from his cracked lips. Grace, tears filled her eyes. She leaned closer, gripping his hand. "I'm here," she whispered. "You're safe." But the doctor's face told another story. The machines beeped erratically. "He's crashing." "Step back." Nurses flooded the room, shouting codes and numbers Grace didn't understand. She was shoved into the hallway, the door slamming shut behind her. Through the small window, she could see the chaos, the defibrillator pads, the flashes of light, the desperate rhythm of compressions. Grace slid down the wall, sobbing into her hands. Every part of her screamed that this was her fault. She'd brought the storm into his life, and now it was swallowing them both. Minutes later, the doctor stepped out, wiping sweat from her forehead. Her expression was unreadable. "As stable," she said finally. "Barely. He'll need to stay under sedation for now." Grace nodded numbly. Relief didn't feel like victory, it felt like exhaustion. The detective who had questioned her earlier appeared beside her. "You need to come with me," he said quietly. "That man who tried to kill you, he's ex-Mercer Security. Formerly assigned to Evelyn Blake." Grace's stomach dropped. So it was her. He nodded grimly. "We think she's tying up loose ends. But there's something else." He handed her a small flash drive, sealed in an evidence bag. "We found this in his jacket. It's labeled Echo Final Archive. Whatever it is, he was supposed to destroy it." Grace stared at the drive, her reflection warped in its surface. "It's proof," she whispered. "Proof of everything." The detective gave her a look filled with warning. Or its bait. "Be careful what you open, Miss Nolan." When he left, Grace slipped back into Cole's room. The storm outside had calmed, but the world inside her hadn't. She sat beside his bed, holding his hand, the flash drive burning a hole in her pocket. "You wanted to die," she said softly, tears streaking her cheeks. "But I'm not letting either of us end that way." Cole's heart monitor beeped steadily, slow, fragile, alive. And as thunder rolled faintly in the distance, Grace realized she wasn't just fighting for the truth anymore. She was fighting for both of their souls. The hospital lights never dimmed, not even at night. Grace had been there for 2 days, sleeping in the chair beside Cole's bed, the flash drive hidden in her pocket like a secret heartbeat. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the muzzle of the gun, the flashing monitors, Cole whispering her name from the edge of death. On the morning of the 3rd day, the doctor approached quietly. "He's breathing on his own now," she said, "but the coma may last weeks or minutes. The brain decides." Grace nodded, her fingers laced through his. "He's stubborn," she whispered. "Hell fight." After the doctor left, she plugged the flash drive into her old laptop, its cracked screen flickering to life. Dozens of encrypted files appeared, financial records, experiment logs, even video footage. She opened one labeled Echo Prototype, Trial Alpha. The image that appeared made her blood run cold. Her father. Thomas Nolan sat in a hospital gown, hooked to wires, smiling nervously into the camera. "If this works," he said, "we'll be able to preserve human memory. Stop death before it wins." A younger Cole appeared beside him, full of energy and promise. "Ready?" he asked. Seconds later, the machines screamed. Her father convulsed. The screen went black. Then another video loaded automatically. It was Evelyn Blake, years later, speaking directly to the camera. "The project was never meant to save lives," she said. "It was meant to control them." Grace slammed the laptop shut, trembling. Everything clicked into place. Evelyn had taken over after Thomas's death, twisting his research into a weapon for profit. Cole had tried to stop her and failed. She looked at the man lying unconscious beside her. His face was pale but peaceful, as if the storm in him had quieted for the first time. She leaned closer, whispering, "You tried to fix what she broke. You don't owe her any more." That afternoon, a nurse entered Kulund, holding a stack of letters. "These came for Mr. Mhardat. Mercer," she said, setting them on the table. "Corporate mail." Grace hesitated, then opened the top envelope. Inside was a resignation letter already signed in Cole's handwriting. Beneath it, another note short, written in pen. "If I don't make it, dismantle Cross Tech. Give everything back to the people who lost because of me." Tears blurred her vision. For the first time, she didn't see a billionaire, a drunk, or a ghost of guilt. She saw a man trying to make peace with his own demons. That evening, she went to the hospital to chapel, its stained glass windows painting the floor in fractured color. She prayed not for miracles, but for mercy. "If he wakes up," she whispered, "you'll help him make it right, even if it destroys us both." When she returned to the room, the beeping of the monitors had changed. Faster, steadier. She rushed to his side. Cole's fingers twitched, his lips parting slightly. Then hoarsely, he spoke. "Grace," she froze. "Cole, you're awake." He blinked slowly, confusion clouding his eyes. "Where am I?" "In the hospital. You've been out for days." He tried to sit up, groaned, and fell back. "Evelyn, she'll come for you." "I know," Grace said, squeezing his hand. "But we're not running anymore. We're going to end this." His gaze met hers, weak but alive. "You sound like him," he murmured. "Like who?" "Your father." She smiled through her tears. "Then maybe it's time we finish what he started." For the first time, he managed a faint smile. "You're not afraid anymore." Grace shook her head. "Fear doesn't keep you alive. Fighting does." Outside, the rain stopped. The city's skyline glowed gold beneath a breaking sun, and as light poured through the window, Grace felt it for the first time, the quiet beginning of redemption, not for one of them, but for both. 2 weeks after Cole woke, the world thought he was still in a coma. That was exactly how he wanted it. The hospital discharged him quietly under a fake name, and Grace went with him. No reporters, no headlines, just 2 ghosts escaping into the night. They flew to the one place no one would look for them, back to the island where it all began. The mansion stood silent, wrapped in salt and memory. Weeds had crawled up the marble steps, and the once glittering chandeliers hung coated with dust. Grace hesitated at the entrance. "You sure about this?" Cole nodded, his voice low. "Evelyn's secrets are here. The files, the backups, everything she used to control me." Inside, the air was heavy with rot and nostalgia. Grace ran her hand along the piano where he'd once played in the dark. The keys were cold now. "Feels like walking into a grave," she whispered. Cole didn't disagree. He led her down to a hidden basement behind the study. When the biometric scanner blinked red, he pressed his hand against it. It flashed green. "Still remembers me," he muttered. The metal door opened with a hiss. Inside were rows of servers and boxes labeled Echo Phase 1 VX. A faint hum filled the air. Grace walked slowly between the shelves, reading the labels. Subject 47. Nolan, Thomas. Her father's name again. She reached for the folder, but Cole stopped her. "Wait." From the shadows, a voice echoed. "I wouldn't touch that if I were you." Grace froze. A figure stepped into the light. Evelyn Blake, alive, radiant, and more dangerous than ever. She was dressed in black, her smile sharp as a blade. "You two just can't leave the past alone, can you?" Grace's heart pounded. "You're supposed to be dead." Evelyn laughed softly. "Oh, I was. On paper." Cole's little guilt problem made it convenient. "But you can't destroy a ghost that never existed." Cole's jaw tightened. "You murdered Thomas Nolan. You turned Project Echo into a machine for profit." Evelyn tilted her head. "Murder?" he volunteered. "You both know that. He wanted to live forever, didn't he? I just gave him what he wanted." Grace shook her head. "You used him." Evelyn's smile faded. "And you? What are you using him for?" She nodded toward Cole. "The billionaire who ruined your life. Don't pretend you're innocent, sweetheart." The words hit like acid. Grace looked at Cole, saw the shadow of guilt flash across his face, and hated that Evelyn saw it too. "I'm not here for revenge," Grace said. "I'm here for the truth." Evelyn stepped closer, her heels clicking against the floor. "Then here it is. Your father didn't die because of Cole. He died because of me. I needed results, and he gave them to me. His mine, the Dartites, all still here." She gestured to the servers. "Every thought, every memory. He's alive, in a way. Would you like to talk to him?" Grace's breath caught. "You're lying," Evelyn smirked. "Try me." Cole moved first. "Don't listen to her." He lunged forward, grabbing Evelyn's wrist just as she pulled a small pistol from her coat. The gun fired. The shot echoed through the room. Grace screamed. Cole stumbled, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers. Evelyn laughed, stepping back toward the door. "You never learn, Cole. Always trying to save what's already lost." Grace grabbed the nearest folder and hurled it at the control panel. Sparks exploded. The lights flickered. Evelyn turned to run as alarms blared. Cole, pale and shaking, looked at Grace. "Get the drives," he gasped. "Don't let her leave with them." But it was too late. Evelyn vanished into the smoke, leaving behind a trail of blood and a promise. "You can't kill what you created." As the flames licked the walls and the servers hissed their last breath, Grace realized the truth wasn't buried on this island, it was alive, and it was coming for them. Smoke clawed through the air, thick and choking. The alarm screamed above them as flames swallowed the lower walls of the underground lab. Grace coughed, covering her mouth with her sleeve. Cole was slumped against a server rack, blood soaking through his shirt. The red light from the alarms painted his face like something already half gone. "Cole, we have to move," she cried, pulling his arm over her shoulder. He gritted his teeth, trying to stand. "Go without me." "Not a chance." Sparks burst from the ceiling as they stumbled through the corridor, the smell of melted wires filling their lungs. Behind them, the servers collapsed one by one, decades of secrets burning to ash. But somewhere in the chaos, Evelyn's voice echoed faintly through the intercom, calm and cruel. "You can't save him, Grace. He doesn't belong to you. He belongs to Echo." Grace looked up at the speaker, rage cutting through her fear. "You killed my father, and now you want his work to die with you?" Evelyn laughed. "Oh, sweet girl, your father's work is me." Cole pressed a bloody hand against the wall, his breath shallow. "She's using the data from Project Echo. It's not just FileSit's consciousness replication." She backed herself up. Grace froze. "You mean she's not even human?" "She's both," he rasped. "And neither." They reached the staircase leading to the surface, but the fire had already crawled halfway up. Cole stumbled nearly falling. Grace tightened her grip, tears stinging her eyes. "Come on, stay with me." He gave a weak smile. "You saved me once on a balcony. Guess this makes twice." "Shut up and walk," she said, voice breaking. They emerged into the stormy night. Rain hissed against the flames, turning the air into steam. Grace half dragged him toward the courtyard, where the helicopter Evelyn had arrived in still idled, its rotors spinning. She could see a figure inside Evelyn herself, watching them like a queen from her throne. "Grace," she shouted over the roar of the blades. "Don't be foolish. Get in. We can finish your father's work together." Grace's voice trembled with fury. He believed in saving lives, not stealing them. Evelyn smirked. "And what about you? You think you're any different? You've used his guilt, his money, his love. Don't pretend you're not taking what you need." The words hit hard, sharp as glass. For a moment, Grace faltered. Evelyn's laughter cut through the storm. "You see? We're the same, you and I." Cole's voice, hoarse but steady, rose beside her. "No. She's better than both of us." He raised a small device in his hand, a detonator, connected to the lab below. "You wanted immortality, Evelyn? Here's your eternity." Evelyn's smile vanished. "Don't you dare!" He pressed the button. The ground rumbled. A roar tore through the island as the underground servers exploded, sending fire and debris skyward. The blast threw Grace backward. The helicopter tilted, its pilot screaming as it spun out of control and crashed into the trees beyond the mansion. When the world finally stopped shaking, Grace crawled toward Cole. He was lying on his back, eyes half open, breathing shallowly. "Why?" she whispered, shaking him. "We could have run." He smiled faintly. "You said it yourself. Some things shouldn't be saved." Tears blurred her vision. "No. Not you." He reached up, touching her cheek with a trembling hand. "You saved me 3 times, Grace. Let this one be mine." She held his hand until it went still. The rain poured harder, washing the blood from his fingers, but not from her heart. And as the flames dimmed and sirens echoed from the distant shore, Grace understood the cruel truth. The man she saved had just given his life to save her soul. The island burned for 2 days. By the time the Coast Guard reached it, the mansion was nothing but twisted steel and blackened ash. Grace was found on the northern beach, barely conscious, clutching Cole's blood-stained bracelet. When she woke in a Miami hospital, the world already knew everything, or thought it did. "Cole Mercer, dead in explosion," the headlines read. Project Echo exposed. But the truth was far murkier. Grace became the story the media couldn't stop spinning. The waitress who saved a billionaire, destroyed his empire, and maybe loved him. Reporters camped outside the hospital gates, shouting her name like it was currency. The FBI came next. They wanted answers, and that flash drive she had hidden inside her shoe when she was rescued. For hours, agents questioned her about Evelyn Blake, Project Echo, and the explosion. Grace said only one thing: "I want to testify." They looked at her like she was crazy. "Miss Nolan," one agent warned, "Evelyn Blake is alive, dangerous, and probably already rebuilding what Mercer tried to stop. You need protection, not a microphone." Grace met his gaze. "No, I need the world to hear the truth." 2 weeks later, the federal trial began. United States versus Evelyn Blake. Grace sat at the witness table, her hands trembling beneath the wood. Cameras flashed. Every seat in the courtroom was filled. Evelyn entered wearing white, her smile soft, her composure perfect. She looked like a saint walking to confession. When their eyes met, Grace felt the same chill as that night on the island. Evelyn winked. The prosecution presented its case: corporate espionage, illegal human trials, tax fraud, conspiracy to murder. The evidence from Cole's destroyed servers and Grace's flash drive was overwhelming. But Evelyn's lawyers were ruthless. They painted Grace as unstable, a jealous lover who'd fabricated everything for fame and revenge. When it was her turn to testify, the room went silent. Grace took a shaky breath and told them everything about her father, about Cole, about the island, the fire, the lies. Her voice trembled only once when she said, "He wasn't a monster. He was a man trying to fix one." Evelyn leaned back, arms crossed, smiling faintly. When her turn came, she stood like she owned the courtroom. "My sister married a genius," she said sweetly, "but genius doesn't excuse madness." Project Echo was his obsession. Grace Nolan? She's just another broken woman who fell in love with a ghost. Grace felt the sting, but didn't flinch. Instead, she pulled something from her pocket, the gold locket Cole had given her, her father's initials engraved inside. She opened it and placed it on the evidence table. "This was found in the Project Echo vault," she said. "It's proof my father's mind was used in the trials. The last memory recorded was him begging Evelyn to stop." The courtroom erupted. Evelyn's mask cracked, if only for a moment. When the jury returned 3 days later, their verdict thundered through the room. Guilty on all counts. Evelyn stood still as the judge read the sentence, life imprisonment. Only then did she turn to Grace, her voice low, venomous. "You think this ends with me? You can't kill an idea, darling." Grace met her gaze, steady and cold. "No, but you can bury it." Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted her name, but for once Grace didn't run. She lifted her head to the sky, the same sky that had once swallowed fire and smoke. And when the crowd grew quiet, she whispered to no one and everyone. He kept his promise. That night, as news anchors replayed her testimony across every screen in America, Grace Nolan became something larger than tragedy. She became proof that even in a world built on lies, truth still burns brighter than fire. The verdict changed everything, but not in the way Grace expected. Justice didn't heal her. It only left a quieter kind of pain. Evelyn was in prison. The news cycle had moved on, and the world wanted a new story. But for Grace, silence was the hardest sound. She left Miami without telling anyone. The hospital bills, the interviews, the lawyers, all of it felt like noise. What she needed wasn't applause. She needed peace. 3 months after the trial, she rented a small cottage on the Oregon coast, a place where the ocean didn't roar. It whispered. Every morning, she walked along the cliffs with a cup of coffee, the wind tangling her hair, the sky grey and endless. She had started painting again, something she hadn't done since her father's death. Her son, Oliver, was back with her now. His speech therapy had been restarted, funded quietly by an anonymous donor. Every time she watched him form a word, her chest tightened. His first complete sentence came one quiet morning when he looked up at her and said, "Mom, happy?" She smiled through tears. Almost. But there were nights she still woke to the memory of Cole. His voice, his laugh, the way his eyes softened only when he looked at her. Sometimes she swore she could still feel his presence in the wind that rattled the window, or the music she thought she heard faintly when she painted. Then one foggy afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a simple note. "Grace, if you're reading this, it means you kept fighting. I knew you would. There's a place I need you to see. Cross the ocean, find the house with blue shutters, and ask for Henry. See." Her heart pounded. Cole's handwriting. She had seen it enough times to know. Could it be possible? He couldn't be alive. The explosion, the fire, the body, everything said otherwise. And yet, hope was a dangerous thing that Grace had never learned to kill. 2 weeks later, she and Oliver boarded a flight to Ireland, following the coordinates scribbled faintly on the bottom of the letter. The journey took them through winding coastal roads and endless green hills, until finally They found it. A small stone house overlooking the Atlantic, shutters painted ocean blue. A man in his 60s answered the door. "You must be Grace," he said with a smile. "I'm Henry." Her breath caught. "He told you it'd come?" Henry nodded, motioning her inside. The cottage was warm, filled with the smell of coffee and salt. On the table sat a wooden box engraved with her initials. "Cole left this here," Henry said gently. "Said you'd need it when you were ready." Grace opened the box with trembling hands. Inside were letters, dozens of theme, each sealed in brown paper. The first was labeled, "Start here." She unfolded it carefully. "Grace, if you're reading this, then I didn't survive the fire. But if I'm wrong, and something of me lives on, it's only because of you. I couldn't undo what I built, but you did. I wanted to build emirs. You wanted to build hope. You were right. Always were. Don't stop." Her tears fell freely onto the page. In the bottom of the box, she found one more thing. A deed. Cole had transferred ownership of the Oregon property to her name, along with enough money to fund Oliver's future. She closed her eyes, whispering into the quiet room, "You kept your promise again." The wind outside shifted, carrying the faintest echo of piano notes through the open window, the same melody he used to play in the dark. And for the first time in years, Grace didn't cry because of loss. She cried because, somehow, even in death, Cole had found a way to love her back. 6 months after Grace found the box of letters, the world had started to forget the name Cole Mercer. The media had moved on to newer scandals, fresher faces. But Grace couldn't. She kept rereading his words late at night, tracing the ink with trembling fingers. Each letter felt like a heartbeat from a ghost. By spring, she had turned the Oregon cottage into something new, a small art studio by day, and a shelter for struggling single mothers by night. The sign outside read, "The Blue Haven." Every wall inside carried a piece of her story sketches of her father, of Oliver, of a man she could never stop loving. One morning, while she was teaching Oliver how to mix paint, a black SUV stopped in front of the cottage. A tall man in a suit stepped out, holding an envelope. "Ms. Nolan?" he asked. Grace's heart clenched. "Who's asking?" He handed her the envelope without answering. "You'll want to read this privately." Then he turned and left, the SUV disappearing down the foggy road. Inside the envelope was an embossed seal she hadn't seen in a year, Cross Tech Industries. Her pulse quickened. The letter read, "To Ms. Grace Nolan, the board of Cross Tech formally invites you to attend the company's global restructuring meeting in San Francisco. You are listed as a partial beneficiary of the Mercer Trust. Attendance mandatory." She read it twice. "Beneficiary," she whispered. Cole had left her more than she'd ever imagined. But she also knew the board filled with the same people who once sided with Evelyn wouldn't summon her for kindness. 2 weeks later, she boarded a plane to San Francisco. As the engines roared, her stomach churned with déjà vu. The first time she'd ever stepped on a jet, it had been Cole's. Back then, she'd been terrified. Now she was prepared. The Crosstech Tower loomed above the city, its mirrored glass reflecting the grey sky. Inside the conference room, she was greeted with polite stares and veiled hostility. Men in tailored suits whispered to one another, clearly wondering why the waitress turned witness was here. At the head of the table sat the interim chairman, a greying executive named Marcus Lang. "Ms. Nolan," he said smoothly, "thank you for joining us. You were mentioned in Mr. Mercer's will. Apparently he left you 20% of the company." Grace blinked. "That's impossible." "On the contrary," Lang said, sliding a folder toward her. "It's all legal. However, before the transfer finalizes, the board wishes to negotiate terms." She stared at him, realization dawning. "You want me to sign it back?" Lang smiled. "We believe it's what Mr. Mercer would have wanted. After all, you're an artist, not a CEO." Grace's hands tightened around the folder. For a moment, she heard Cole's voice in her head, calm, teasing, alive. Don't let them tell you what you can't do. She looked up, meeting every pair of expectant eyes around the table. You're right, she said softly. I'm not a CEO. Relieved smiles flickered, but then she continued, her voice firm. I'm a woman who watched a good man die cleaning up this company's mess. So no, I won't sign anything. Crosstech will finally do what it should have done, serve people, not exploit them. The room went silent. Lang's smile vanished. You don't have that kind of power. Grace stood. Then you've already forgotten who taught me how to fight. As she walked out, she glanced back at the Crosstech logo gleaming behind her, once a symbol of greed. Now something she intended to rebuild. Hours later, on her flight home, the pilot's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain, Henry Mercer. Grace's heart stopped. Henry. Cole's father. She hadn't seen him since Ireland. The cockpit door opened briefly, and there he was, older, gentler, smiling. Your son said you like surprises, he said through the speaker. This one's from Cole. Tears filled her eyes as the plane banked toward the sunset. For the first time since the fire, Grace wasn't running from the sky, she was rising with it. The jet descended over Manhattan at dusk, its wings slicing through pink and gold clouds. Grace pressed her palm to the window, staring at the skyline she had once feared, the same glittering city where her story had begun, where she'd been nobody but a waitress with shaking hands and an impossible dream. Now she was returning, not as a ghost of that girl, but as a woman who had lived, lost, and learned how to survive both. Henry Mercer guided the jet smoothly toward the landing strip. He wanted you to see it again, he said over the intercom. Grace's throat tightened. He? Henry smiled. My son. Before the end, Cole wrote to me, told me if you ever found your way back here, I should bring you to the Sky Lounge. The name hit her like a heartbeat. The Sky Lounge. The place where Cole had almost fallen to his death, where she had first caught his arm and changed both their lives forever. Later that evening, she stood outside the same towering building, now restored and shining brighter than she remembered. The doorman, recognizing her name, guided her to the private elevator. Top floor, he said with a knowing smile. They've been expecting you. The elevator doors opened to a space bathed in warmed golden light. The Sky Lounge looked the same, the balcony overlooking the city, the polished marble floors, the soft jazz humming in the background. But something new waited in the center. A long table surrounded by people she didn't recognize, engineers, scientists, young innovators. A woman approached, smiling nervously. Ms. Nolan, we're the new Crosstech Foundation. We work for you. Grace blinked. For me? Yes, the woman said. Mr. Mercer left instructions. The company's remaining assets were to be transformed into scholarships, research grants, and medical funding, all under your name. He called it the Nolan Initiative. Grace covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. He did this? The woman nodded. Every penny. Henry entered quietly behind her, watching the moment with soft pride. He said if he couldn't build something that lasted, he wanted you to. Grace walked slowly towards her, toward the balcony, the night air cool against her skin. Below, the city pulsed with light, alive and endless. She could almost hear Cole's voice in the hum, that familiar mix of arrogance and tenderness. Henry joined her. He never stopped loving you, you know. Grace smiled faintly. I know. He just didn't know how to stay. She looked out at the spot where it had all begun, the railing where Cole had once slipped, the moment that had tethered their souls together. A quiet peace washed over her. Inside, the young team clinked glasses in celebration of the Foundation's launch. Grace raised her own glass toward the skyline. "To Cole," she said softly. "To second chances." Henry nodded. "And to the ones who save us when we don't deserve it." The music swelled. The lights of the city shimmered like stars trapped in glass. Grace took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything she'd lost and everything she'd become. Then she noticed something on the table near the window, a small black velvet box. She opened it. Inside was a delicate pendant shaped like an airplane wing, engraved with 2 words, "Fly again." Her tears finally fell. She put it on, feeling the warmth of it against her chest. Outside, a light breeze swept across the balcony, lifting her hair, carrying the faintest scent of ocean salt. The island, the fire, the man she'd saved. Grace looked up, smiling through her tears. "I'm flying, Cole," she whispered. "We both are." And as the night deepened, the city glowed beneath her, proof that sometimes the places that once broke you can also be the places where you finally learn to soar. The sun rose soft and gold over the Oregon coast, painting the waves in liquid light. Grace stood on the porch of her small cafe Echo, watching the horizon melt into color. The sign above the door, carved by her own hands, read, "For those who saved and were saved." It wasn't just a business. It was a sanctuary, a place built from everything she and Cole had fought for. Inside, the cafe buzzed with quiet life. Locals drank their morning coffee, travelers scribbled in notebooks, and single mothers chatted while their children colored in the corner. The scent of cinnamon and sea air wrapped around the room. On one wall hung a single-framed photo, the last picture ever taken of Cole, smiling beside her at a charity gala months before his death. Beneath it, engraved in brass, were the words, "Some debts can't be repaid, only lived differently." Grace refilled a pot of coffee, glancing out the window just in time to see Oliver playing on the beach. He was 9 now, his laughter carried by the wind. His speech had returned, his smile brighter than she'd ever dared to dream. Watching him chase the tide felt like witnessing her own heart learning how to breathe again. A bell chimed softly as the cafe door opened. Henry Mercer stepped inside, his face lined with age and kindness. "Still opening before sunrise, I see," he said with a smile. Grace poured him a cup without asking. "Old habits." He nodded toward the photo of Cole. "You've done him proud." "Maybe," she said quietly, "but I still wish he could see it." Henry smiled gently. "Oh, I think he does." They sat by the window, watching the light dance across the water. After a long silence, Henry pulled something from his coat pocket, a small black notebook. "He asked me to give you this if you ever found peace," he said. "Told me I'd know when that day came." Grace's hands trembled as she took it. Inside were fragments of Cole's handwriting sketches, ideas, half-finished quotes. But tucked in the final page was a letter, sealed and yellowed from time. She unfolded it slowly, her heart pounding. "Grace, if this reaches you, it means you made it. You kept fighting when I couldn't. I used to believe love was about possession, about holding on. But you showed me it's about release. I tried to leave a world behind for you. But I realize now, you were never meant to live in my shadow. You were meant to build your own light. Every sunrise, think of it as a message not from me, but from the parts of us that learned how to stay even after goodbye. Fly again. Cole." Tears slipped down Grace's cheeks, but for the first time in years they didn't hurt. They felt like sunlight. Henry rose to leave. "The city's opening a research wing in his name next month," he said. "The Nolan Initiative. You should come." Grace smiled. "I'll send Oliver. I think his story begins where ours ended." When Henry left, she stepped outside, the sea breeze cool against her skin. Oliver waved from the shore. "Mum, come play." She laughed, running barefoot across the sand, her heart light. The waves splashed over her feet, cold and alive. For a brief, perfect moment, she could almost feel Cole beside her, not as a ghost, but as warmth, as wind, as peace. Oliver looked up, eyes bright. "Mum, are we happy now?" Grace knelt, pressing her forehead to his. "We're free," she whispered. The tide rolled in, erasing their footprints, but not their story. The morning sun climbed higher, its reflection rippling like a promise. And as Grace lifted her face to the light, she knew it was not the end at all, just a new dawn, written in the language of second chances, of love that outlived even death. So that's it, our story has come to an end. But if you're still here, listening until this very moment, maybe something in Grace's journey touched your heart. Maybe it reminded you of your own battles, your own nights of falling and rising again. You see, life isn't about avoiding the storms, it's about learning to dance in the rain. Like the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once said, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Grace learned that pain doesn't end us, it refines us. Sometimes we meet people who break us, and sometimes we meet people who save us. But the most powerful healing begins when we decide to save ourselves. That's what Grace and Cole's story truly taught us. Redemption is possible, love can outlive loss, and peace comes when we forgive life for being hard. If this story made you feel something, even just a little warmth, a small spark of hope, then don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs a reminder that healing is real, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that speak straight to the heart. We're still here, together. And that means your new dawn is already beginning.